mitigation measures prior to their integration into the building code itself, and to give the construction industry time to become familiar with the techniques for more efficient building design and construction. We're now at a time when those measures are being adopted into the building code. On May 1st of this year, the Minister for Housing will sign an order amending the Building Act General Regulation, which will amend Part 9, Section 36 of the Building Code to require conformance to what would have been Step 3 of the Energy Step Code. This change will effectively render our Part 20 of the District of Sechelt Building Code requiring Step 1 null and void as per the Building Act. Does not allow or permit a municipality to have provisions in a bylaw that are not unrestricted matters as outlined in the Building Act and the Building Act General Regulation. So in essence, we cannot have a bylaw that contravenes the requirements of the Building Code. In response to Northern British Columbian communities, the Building Safety Standards Branch has recommended that prescriptive requirements for the new energy efficiency and building performance standards be in the body of the Building Code. What this means in a nutshell is that building officials can no longer rely on the performance path, whereby modeling by an energy advisor would determine the overall performance of the building and set out the energy requirements for heating, cooling, and domestic hot water equipment. The difference between the prescriptive path, which is now in the Building Code, and the performance path, which was there, is that the prescriptive path dictates exactly which each wall, ceiling, and floor assembly must have in the way of R value and construction and openings, and sets out the airtightness value based on these prescriptive measures, whereas the performance path requires the entire building to perform to a predetermined level further confirmed by on-site airtightness testing of the entire building. The consequence of the prescriptive path for us will be longer plan review times and the designs of buildings becoming more standardized in that you'll have limits on openings facing north and what have you. Several stakeholders, including the Regional Permits and Licenses Committee, of which I am a member on behalf of the District of Sechelt, raised concerns about this more restrictive requirement, how it could impact the length of plan reviews, and how buildings could be shaped to fit the requirements rather than the requirement of an overall conformance model instead. In response to this, the minister is allowing municipalities to maintain the status quo of a performance path by requiring a bylaw amendment to the building bylaw to allow performance path to be a measure by which we would comply with the new requirements. This is the recommended course of action for council to take, but I must point out it's not the only one available. Council could recommend that the building bylaw not be amended, except to remove Step 1 and in fact remove all of Part 20 of the building bylaw. Or that you could go to Step 4, which is several communities in BC have already done. Step 4 would require higher steps of the Energy Step Code and is more difficult to attain because of higher performance required from building envelopes and wall assemblies. 2x8 walls, exterior insulation. It can add quite a bit of cost, but many communities are going that route. And I am available to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Perhaps we could have that in English now.
Yes, Your Worship. In essence, the province is moving towards net zero ready buildings for the 2032 building code. And those will be very high performing buildings in the fact that they will have much higher insulation values and restrictions on air leakage, thereby reducing a couple of terms that we use in this industry. Mechanical energy use intensity, and that's how much heat you have to put into a building to maintain the temperature or cooling, including domestic hot water. But the higher steps are also going to be looking at things like the energy consumed by fans, circulators, HRVs, and lighting. TEDI is the thermal energy demand intensity, and it's a measure of the annual energy consumption of a building. So if you have one of these higher performing buildings with great insulation, very airtight, the TEDI is lower than the buildings that we would be building now, thereby with less energy demands. The demands on your mechanical energy also go down. Hence, by 2032, we will have buildings which will be net zero ready and will be net zero if you want to put things like photovoltaic solar panels on top of them. They will have zero energy draw from exterior sources.
Thank you.
That help?
Yeah, so we're essentially the performance path is it's taking us towards ultimately step 4, but this is an interim step.
We are going that way. The province is mandating it, and in 5 years, we will be at step 4. But what the performance path, what the recommendation is to allow buildings to fit an overall model rather than restricting the amount of openings you can have in wall assemblies and making things much more, I hate to use the word, but Soviet in their appearance.
Okay.
We all like to use, in the planning world, we always point to the Soviet era block apartments, one after the other. And that's something we don't want to have. We want to be able to give the versatility to designers and contractors to, yes, this is the objective that you have to hit. We're looking at this kind of energy utilization, but what your building is going to look like is very much how you can design it to fit this.
Great, thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Just two questions to the chair. Has the SCRD and Town of Gibson's chosen an approach to their building code? And secondly, if we choose to follow your recommendation, is there going to be a problem when we hit 2032? Are there going to have to be substantial changes to our building code if we follow the performance model that you're suggesting? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Shepherd, I don't know if the SCRD and Gibson's are going to amend their building bylaws to allow the performance path. I have been in contact with my colleagues in both Gibson's and the SCRD and have let them know that I am going to ask council to adopt this measure as it in a way it's maintaining the status quo. And this is something that Gibson's and the SCRD are also doing by relying on energy modeling by certified energy advisors. We will end up at net zero houses anyway in 2032. However, I think that we will still be allowed to use the performance path rather than outright prescriptive measures. For those of us that have been around a while, you remember the first incarnation of the R2000 houses. I mean, you would have 300 feet of wall and maybe 8 square feet of window in it. And it was just because back in the day, the windows performed so poorly, they didn't fit the R2000 requirement. Thankfully, the windows are getting much better, and in high performing houses, we see triple glazed and sealed window systems, which perform great for air leakage. They perform great in that insofar as their insulation value is looking more like an insulated wall rather than back in the old days when we used to joke the only difference between a window and a hole in the wall is the window won't let your candle blow out if it's on the sill. So things are getting much better in the industry on the whole. And I think what will happen is that the province, providing that we all do our bit with the performance path, will allow that to continue even into 2032.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bell, please.
Through the chair. A question, first of all, I really like the direction we're going in net zero, even whenever that's going to be. That's a great goal. This is quite frankly another language that you were speaking earlier, so I don't understand all of the specifics, but I don't need to, I'm sure at this point. That's your job. But I just picked up on the energy advisors. Is there a part of a process that they Are they in the process now, or is it something we'll need more energy advisors as we move forward? And the reason I ask that question is my understanding is I've heard through, just through various conversations that they're very difficult to find energy advisors.
Through the chair to Councillor Bell, when we first brought in Step Code, there was no one on the coast that was an energy advisor. Thankfully, we have seen many more energy advisors working on the coast and one that is local, and they are all certified through NRCan. This is a requirement that they need to have in order for them to be an energy advisor. And we are not wanting for them. But I think it is potentially, and another nice thing about Performance Path is we are supporting that arm of the construction industry, and that we are promoting the use of energy advisors in the building design itself right from the get-go. That there is this sensible approach to energy efficiency and the global design of a building to meet these requirements. And that is the role of the energy advisor.
Councillor McLaughlin, I see your finger poised on the mic.
Yeah, yes, through the chair. I'm just wondering whether the performance path you're suggesting would actually take more time for staff, because we already get sort of criticized for taking too long for processing permits, et cetera. And also, I'm just wondering as well how this would affect multifamily developments that hopefully we'll be building more of in the future. And will that affect their cost? And as a part of that also, would it not be advisable to go to a higher level of energy efficiency for the sake of those in multifamily developments? Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor McLaughlin, the changes proposed right now deal with Part 9 buildings, which are standard buildings up to 3 stories in height and not more than 600 square meters of building footprint. If the multifamily buildings you're referring to are not part of the changes as of May 1st, but I guarantee you they will be as of the end of the year when they enact the new 2022 building code. This is a technical change to the 2018 building code right now. The entire new building code will be upon us by the end of the year. Typically, the provincial government enacts that in the middle of December. At that time, I expect there will be requirements for Part 3 buildings, the kind of buildings you're talking about, and there will be a cost impact. Now, we have right now in the application a multifamily building that is going to be effectively Step 4. And this is what the owner of the building wants to do in order to mitigate their energy costs, anticipating that it will only go up, but also to provide opportunities for people to be living in a building that is energy efficient and can hang their hat on that. So you're right, there is a trend to go that way. And I think the more people become aware, the better it is. When Step Code first came out, we were wrestling with going to higher steps, thinking that people had more interest in going to granite countertops and high performing windows. I think that is changing.
Thanks. Something else, Councillor McLaughlin?
Yeah, sorry, through the chair. Just one more question, which might not be something you'd say yes to, but I know in the past, and also considering our water issues, I'm wondering if you've recently considered putting in sprinklers into single family homes going forward as part of our requirements. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor McLaughlin. By sprinklers, I assume you mean fire sprinkler systems. It's a very good question. Right now, our building bylaw has provisions in it requiring sprinklers in buildings that the building code does not. In 2015, the province brought in the Building Act, and in 2017, they had received a report from the Fire Sprinkler Working Group, which was made up of building officials, code consultants, and local fire chiefs. And they decided not to abrogate bylaws of municipalities that had sprinkling provisions because, quite frankly, those provisions in those bylaws reflected the capability of fire departments, where you have solely volunteer fire departments, or you have partial professional firefighters. And the Office of the Fire Commissioner felt this was an absolute no-go and the province should not do it. So the province considered it a time-limited, unrestricted matter that you could keep the bylaws you had in place as they were, but you could not have new bylaws that increase the number of buildings that you would require to be sprinkled in contravention of the building code. So the short answer to your question, Councillor, is no, we could not do that. But we are, by virtue of us only amending our existing bylaw, albeit drastically at times, we are maintaining those sprinkler provisions that our fire department and the staff here believe are necessary for the safety of our community.
Interesting. Thank you. Councillor Toth?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, because in reading that, I know a lot of the language and I was still having a hard time with it, but it all makes sense. I'd like to move recommendation 1 on page 2.
Thank you. We have a seconder for that? Yes, I see a second. Any further discussion on this matter? Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting, the discussion 15 years ago was 15 or 20 years ago was accessibility in buildings. And that's what a lot of presentations were about. And that's what building was reacting to in terms of the marketability of particular buildings in our aging community. That was the issue, that they talked about wider doors, ramp, single floors, etc. And now we have energy issues, which it's good to see. Although I think we're using electricity a lot, so that's a cheap form of electricity, cheap form of energy as opposed to what other areas are using. But so those just my thoughts on where we need to go in terms of good to see this. What I would ask though through you to building is, say we were to take a house in Las Vegas and build a house like they do in Las Vegas. What do we need, or what should we add, or what should we encourage to be added to our homes here to match a house being built in Las Vegas or areas of California that are suffering from drought?
Your question relates to how do we drought-proof houses?
How do we make our houses more water efficient? What are they doing in those places that we're not requiring? See, one of the things we don't do is we don't require a lot because of the costs that we are told that they will incur. Yet every 5 or 10 years, due to climate change, we're having to make changes to our building codes, seemingly, let's say 15, because it's a big do, so what are we missing? We have our chief building inspector here who has some expertise and knowledge. What should we be seeing next, and what should we be talking about encouraging?
Thanks for that. Can we take that as gentle encouragement to come back and talk about that? Because I think, it's on the path that this is, but probably beyond this particular item.
Yep. I'm okay with the fact that it's not germane to the issue, but we need to continue to talk about the water issue, and the way we build our buildings is another one.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sure the message has been received, request, a suggestion. So thanks, Councillor Inkster. Anything else on this agenda, on this resolution? Not, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, Council. We then go to Councillors Rowe and Toth for home movie. I'm sorry, was it discussion about options for unhoused community members? Councillor Rowe.
I know you're all pretty excited to be here. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So, I personally feel that, when we go away to a conference, that we come back with, some takeaways, hopefully. You should be able to take away a thing or two. And present it to, council, particularly if, we weren't all at the same conference, and share the information also for the public to be able to access. And see what, their taxpayer dollars are paying for us to go to these things. So this story starts actually at UBCM last year, where Councillor Kuster and I attended a session on what some communities were doing for the unhoused population. And it was Victoria, Duncan, and Port Alberni. So they had mayors and councillors that spoke to what solutions they tried. A lot of this was born out of COVID, and I can speak very personally on that topic. The vulnerable population in shelters, in encampments, on the street, were extremely vulnerable to COVID. We saw, a fair amount of death relative to our size, and as did other places. And so part of the impetus on some of the solutions they tried was to be able to isolate them for a period of time, as we all were doing. We were all supposed to be isolating within our bubble. So they started in Victoria, and they essentially built they called it a tiny village. And Duncan then did the same thing. They had a piece of land, and they built one that they've now moved to a different site. And then Port Alberni learned from their learnings and have done the same thing. So after LGLA, I've sort of kept in touch with the councillor and the mayor from these two communities, and kind of followed their journey down this road. And so after LGLA, Alton and I went out to Port Alberni, because they were in the process of putting it together. And we got lucky because there was an artist there who was doing some painting inside the little homes, and he let us on site. So it was great. And hopefully no one found out, get him in trouble. So anyways, I just wanted to share some pictures. This is not me saying, hey, I think we should do this. This is not me saying, hey, this is great, but I don't think we should do this. This is really just sharing what some communities are doing and where they have found some success. So this is a picture in Duncan. Actually, this is the property that that they moved the community to. And it's about one block off of Main Street. There's about, I think they've got about 40 little, they call it, well, they're like tiny houses, but they have there's a common wash house, so bathrooms, showers, and there's common kitchen area, the common gathering area. They've got like a community garden, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's fencing all around it. BC Housing is providing funding, of course, for this. There's 24-hour security, so you can leave in the middle of the night, but nobody can come in that doesn't live there. All of these things also have like as a community service group that is providing services. This program in particular has been very successful with the low barrier employment options. So this one's been around outside of Victoria. This one's been around the longest. So I had to stop. I wanted to show just actually how close to downtown that it was. It's about a block off, and it's right smack dab in the middle of a community full of senior citizens and care facilities. So this is right across the street from that village. So then we go on to Port Alberni, and Port Alberni's issue was born out of this lot it's what, maybe a couple blocks from the main street. And this landlord was renting out these spots to these RVs. As you can see, packing them in pretty snugly. They had tons of issues, tons of fires. Like there's people that are living in half burnt out units, etc. The property next to this one became available, and one of the real estate agents called up somebody at the city and said, "Hey, FYI, this land owner is looking to buy this property next to it, likely with the intention to expand his rental opportunity." So anyways, the city itself purchased it, and they have leased it to a service organization called it's their Friendship Center. They've never been involved in anything to do with housing before, but they are, I think they're probably similar what we would know as Arrowhead. They provide some of those services already to the vulnerable. So they've taken on the project. So this is the site, and I'm not really good at, I don't know if you can estimate how big it is, but the district itself, or I'm not sure, what are they? They're a city, I think, Port Alberni, did the servicing on the lot. And they have an ACET type program in their school district / college. And through that program, the members of that program are doing the building. All of these homes come in on pallets, flat packed, and then the members of the school district are building them, putting them together. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I think they're 8 by 12. Now this is a true real estate photo that makes it look much larger than it is, but they are about 8 by 12. I think she said that they would each have a microwave in them. You recall that? And they're going to have air. And you can see one of the First Nations artists was doing some work. So the picture on the very left is the washroom facility and showers. And then picture on the very right, they haven't started to put the kitchen together, but that's where that is going to be. And then they're going to have bike lockers. And so kits were purchased from a company in Surrey on flat pack on pallets, about $12,000 a piece. Municipality funded the servicing project, operated by a local nonprofit, which is the Friendship Center. This is considered temporary housing. They do have a plan of supportive housing being built in the next 2 years. And as I said, this is modeled after a project that was built in Duncan. And it's interesting talking to the electeds that are involved in this project. One of them actually is a registered psychiatric nurse. And so she's in her work has worked with a lot of this population. And she said what they are finding is that, and I think BC Housing might be starting to recognize this, but that it's actually people that live in this sort of a setup tend to do better than those that live in a shelter, or not a shelter, that are living in supportive housing. In supportive housing, big difference being in supportive housing, they each have their own kitchen. So there's no impetus for them to actually have to come out of their suite. They've got their own kitchen, they've got their own bathroom, which is great in its own right. but it doesn't encourage social contact or being able to, for service providers to, you know, hang out and wait until they go about, as they go about their, you know, if they need to come out to the washroom or whatever. So as we move forward, I thought it was good. First of all, I don't know if Councillor Toss has anything else.
No, I think it was, I think you pretty much said it all. One thing that I thought was really cool was that after we had our quasi self-guided tour of the property, we came out and a resident of the community was driving by and
Oh,
asked
right,
us
yeah.
about it and what was going on. And when we explained the little bit that we knew, the resident was excited for the opportunity that site would bring to the residents. And, you know, the opportunity to clean up the property next door. Let's just
Yeah.
say property next door.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it, like one or two residents that we spoke to, very enthusiastic and supportive of the project. And, yeah, looks like it'll be quite good. And this facility too is gonna be staffed 24/7.
That's right. I think that's part of the involvement with BC housing. I will say that the mayor of Duncan, when she talked about her situation at UBCM last year, they faced massive community outcry that they were going to do this, and you know, they had delegations and petitions and all of it. In her mind, it was the right thing to do. There's at the conference Donna and I went, or Councillor Bell and I went to last week, somebody said there's two things people hate: change and the way things are. So ultimately, I mean, that's what, nobody likes what was going on in the community, but they didn't like the potential solution either. But so that council pushed forward. Port Alberni has not had the same experience. They, and I don't know if it's because the community of Port Alberni was able to see what happened in Duncan. They're not that far apart. I'm not sure, but that hasn't, they've received much more support than Duncan did. So I thought this was kind of timely because we're starting work on the community safety task force, and although that's really built around safety for all residents, that does include this population. So we, just so everyone knows, we are working towards that and getting the membership together and looking towards having some people with experience in all sorts of community safety issues come to Seashell and help give us some feedback based on their knowledge. So happy to talk about this anytime, but I'm just here sharing. So if there's any questions, great. Otherwise, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councillor Inkster has something to say. Question to ask.
Thanks for the two of you, and then a few weeks later for you going again with another council member to look at some more housing issues because it's pressing. And I'm sure you've found that throughout BC, many communities, especially those in what would be considered more climatically hospitable, are dealing with similar issues that we are. It's not just Seashell. I think I sent council a couple of things that, and I hope you're reading them when I send them, because maybe they're like, oh, Darren's sending this again, but I send some things for council to read, to look at and open it up. And one was on SDRs and another one I think was on this issue, but it just to tell us that this is everywhere. So we're all dealing with it. It's not just Seashell. Some local people, I think that it's just our problem, but it's a problem everywhere. So my question is, and I'm sure the two of you thought of this, and probably Councillor Bell has thought of this as well, is location, location, location. Because if in fact we looked at a downtown location, which is in the middle of everything, people that don't have cars, would there be pushback from those people that are tired of this? So we look at a transit accessible situation, which may be West Seashell, which has transit going throughout that community, very accessible community. And then we look at maybe old sewer package plants that have hooked up to our sewage systems. And now there's those pieces of land that are not being used. Those are opportunities. Once again, where the peoples in those neighborhoods say, I don't want you to bring that problem to West Seashell because it was downtown and that's where it should be. So, you know, those are the things that we deal with. And I think, and I would say this to council and to the mayor, is that if we could find a location, we could probably look at some plugged in solutions that would include some very heavy funding from the provincial government that also is trying to help. They're also dealing with, I think the premiers in Nanaimo today talking about crime issues, which are directly, and they know that it's directly related to this issue. So I think they're prepared to step up and communities can find land.
Thanks, Councillor Inkster. For the public, by the way, Councillor Inkster is dressed in black. Why you can't see him today. Technical problems. Your point's well taken. It's a problem everywhere. Location, I think I can speak for Councillor Rowe during after the fire at the shelter. Both we, thanks to our staff and BC Housing have searched high and low. And thanks to St. Hilda's for stepping up on an interim basis, but really lacking in vacant land in the village. Still a huge project and a huge challenge. Councilor McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I was just noting that it looks like a lot of these projects are not so much in residential areas as they are in industrial areas. And that's probably more appropriate. I also wanted to point out that when we had our homeless people representatives come here, they said they wanted to be in Half Moon Bay. You know, we don't own, we have no jurisdiction over Half Moon Bay, but because of that, I think we should be working with the FCRD on coming up with solutions. Third thing is, I think building new housing, new serviced lots or whatever, for a short-term solution is not necessarily a good use of public dollars. I did circulate to councillors an article about empty room and development and the cost of construction, or housing and homelessness shortage. And so maybe something I could suggest would be that in the short term, maybe what some organizations, maybe including the district, I don't know, would be to rent some homes with rooms and bathrooms and a kitchen for a few months to house these people in existing homes that are maybe in the village, maybe elsewhere. We're lucky that way in this area that we do actually have. We have a lot of room for SDRs. That means we have a lot of room for people. And third or last thing really that's important, I think, is we don't have any terms of reference for our committee. And I think before we start talking about solutions and funding and get too far down the line, we should set up a firm set of terms of reference. It's just good practice. And also it would probably give members of my community, which is the downtown village residence area, especially close to where some of the issues are, some security that, you know, we have some terms of reference and we have to proceed cautiously, legally and carefully with anything we suggest or go ahead with. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin, and you're right. And we are working on terms of reference. And I just want to point out that I said at the very, very beginning of this, I'm just sharing information. I'm not suggesting anything. We are so far away from recommending what a solution might be to this. This is just what some communities are doing. And after, maybe after next weekend, there'll be something else to share. And I think we all need to be, keep an open mind and learn what we can from our colleagues. There's something else I was going to say.
I'm going to say, Councillor Toss speak.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in with the, identifying properties that could be appropriate. Obviously, we've thrown that around. We've had, talks between some of us about properties that might be appropriate, but not gonna specifically name an address in Seashelt at this time in an open meeting. But one thing is that at least the Port Alberni project, there's the bottle depot on one side of it. Across the alleyway from it is all single family housing. So it's on sort of the transition area. It's not in an industrial area. It's not in a residential. It is in between. And at the end of the day, you need to go with a lot of this stuff where you can get the people to go. Because if you build it somewhere, well, at the end of West Seashell or Upfield Road, and they can't get there or they can't access the services they need, they'll just keep living in the bushes and wherever they are now. So, just a couple comments. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Rowe remembered.
I did. It was just with the Duncan project, it is smack downtown in a completely senior citizen oriented residential neighborhood. And, that is that's BC Housing's message, is that anything that they fund needs to be where the services are. And that's downtown. So that is a challenge.
Great, thanks. I'd be curious to, Councillor McLaughlin, the empty house or empty room. Does that work? Is the idea that it works for people who are living in their homes and have an extra bedroom?
Well, I guess it could.
Mhm.
And I just want to comment on the needy populations we have. There's a variety of people. I mean, there are some people that need to be on a drug program
No,
and
but they
inject
can-
drugs.
Can you
So
just-
those people would not probably appropriate, but there are also homeless family, women with children that need to be near a school, who don't have a car and are working. So that might be more of a group that would be more suitable for a house with other people. So these are just considerations. Thank you.
Anything else, council? Okay, yeah.
I just want to piggyback on what Councillor McLaughlin just said, because I love this idea. And, I was, for anyone that doesn't know, I was the coordinator for home care services for 5 years. So I've worked a lot with the senior population, and I think, and we know from the housing needs report, how few people are living in these large houses on average on the Sunshine Coast. And somehow, if there's a way to hook up somebody to live with a senior and provide just that minimal support that sometimes ends up, that need drives them out of their home. I think that's something that as a community, not necessarily as a municipality, but as a community, I think that's a missed opportunity. I think could be huge value in there, both for the seniors and for the people that need somewhere reasonable to rent, and the healthcare system, actually.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll end this with a comment that if there was an easy solution, it would have already been done. So my encouragement to all of you as fellow members of the council is we got to try things, because clearly nobody knows what is the perfect solution. We see the stories in Vancouver of one effort that is being tried. We've got the example from Port Alberni and Duncan, but we've got to try things. So whether it's dare say, Councillor McLaughlin, you taking someone into a spare bedroom in your house, or us finding some property that we haven't so far found, we got to try these things. That's what I hope to do this year. Council, any other business? Not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, and seconded. All in favor of adjournment? Carried. Anybody in our gallery? No. Nope, they left. Okay, so I will, for the record, say, are there